Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Connolly, and I am a member of our education department here at the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach, California. And we're so excited that you are joining us today to learn about our local ocean backyard. We're getting a little sneak peek of it here behind me. But before we talk about any of that, I want to mention that while we're doing this program right now, it is 3 p.m. Pacific time. We're live from Long Beach, like I said. If you would like to participate in our program, you are welcome to do that by texting us. We have this phone number that my friend Talia just put up on the screen. We also have Karina and Lourdes with us here in the studio. They're going to be monitoring that line and also controlling all of this magic that you see behind me. So if you would like to text in questions, thoughts, hypotheses when we ask for any of those observations, you're welcome to use that. That phone number is 562-286-1838. That way we can answer your questions live on the broadcast, hear what you have to say. If you're watching this at a later point or you're unable to text us, we still love to hear from you. You're welcome to shoot us an email at that email listed below, which is going to be live@lbaop.org. And someone will respond to you either at a later time or whenever we're able to check that and get back to you or hear your questions. So we always love hearing from you. Please share with us. We love to hear what you guys are thinking at home. All right. So, with that said, I'm going to step off for a second. Let's take a look at what this ocean backyard in question is that I mentioned. So, I want you to take a second and practice some of those scientific skills. So, when we're looking at something, we like to make observations. It means that we're looking at stuff and we're noticing things about it, right? So, when we're looking at this ocean backyard, this habitat that Talia is playing a beautiful clip of here, what do you notice going on in this video? What are some things that you see happening? Do you see any animals that are living in this habitat? Do you see any other kinds of living things? What's going on? Does it seem like it's very still? Is it kind of dynamic? Are things changing, moving? What are we noticing? I know that for me, I'm noticing, first of all, there's lots of this really tall, big green stuff that's covering this ocean habitat. And I notice it's also moving a lot. And it seems to be maybe not moving on its own like a fish swimming, but maybe it's kind of swaying in the ocean. And there seems to be a lot of it in here. And I can see in the background maybe some fish, maybe some other smaller ocean creatures hanging out there. So it seems like this might be a good home for some animals, a good habitat that they might have space to live in and find food and just kind of exist in. Did you notice anything else about this habitat? Yeah, awesome. So what we are looking at right now is, like I mentioned before, our ocean backyard. This habitat is called a kelp forest. And we can find lots of these off of our coast here in California. And the thing that we were seeing, that green stuff that makes up the majority of this habitat, is in fact the kelp. So just like on land, we've got forests, right? They're made up of trees. Our forests in the ocean are made up of all this beautiful kelp. And we can see it here growing and swaying in the ocean and making this beautiful ocean home for all of the animals that inhabit it. So I want to start by talking about the kelp, which might seem a little bit silly, but it's actually a really important living creature in this habitat. So kelp is kind of like a plant. It's actually an algae, but just like when we have a forest on land, right, and the trees make up the forest, how are the trees getting their energy? Are they eating other animals to do that? No, right? They can make their own energy. And what are they using to make that energy? The sunlight, right? So we can see here in the kelp forest, we have some sunlight kind of filtering in from above. We can kind of see these beautiful rays coming down here. So just like a tree would take in sunlight and make energy from it, our kelp can do the same thing. And if we think about, just like with our trees, right, when they do photosynthesis, what do they produce as a byproduct of the reaction of photosynthesis? What's the end product that they release? It's oxygen, right? They're taking in carbon dioxide and sunlight, and they're releasing oxygen. Our kelp is doing the exact same thing. It's also doing photosynthesis, just like a tree. So our kelp forests are a really important source of oxygen, and they're removing that carbon dioxide and creating oxygen for the atmosphere and for the ocean. So the kelp itself is really important. I want to talk a little bit about kind of the different parts of the kelp. So just like on a tree, right, we might have some different things towards the bottom, in the middle, up at the top, right? Our kelp is kind of the same way. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at some of those parts. I wonder if Talia can show us maybe a little closer image or video of one of the parts of the kelp. Ooh, here's a beautiful image here. Thank you so much, Talia. We've even got a beautiful comparison here with it with seagrass, a plant, right? So our kelp here on the left is our algae, and on the right we have our seagrass. And we can see we have a lot of similar parts, but they kind of have slightly different names, right? So on our kelp, on the left, we can see at the very bottom we have what we call the holdfast. Now, what are the holdfast? What does it remind you of? You can see it's kind of on the rock. What does it look like? It kind of looks similar to me. If we're thinking about like a plant on land or a tree, what part would that be on the plant? Yeah, it would be the roots, right? So our kelp, instead of having roots that grow down into the soil, they have this, it almost looks like a pile of spaghetti that grabs onto a rock that holds onto it, right? Hence the name holdfast, and allows it to get a nice grip on there and then grow up from there. And then we have kind of that main central part of the kelp. So on our plant, that would be perhaps the stem, right? Or the trunk of a tree. And on the kelp, instead what we call it is the stipe. And that's what grows right up from the holdfast. And all of those other things are kind of growing off the stipe. Just like on a plant, right, you might have the stem and all the leaves are growing off from there. And then the last part, and the most visible part that we could see in that video with all that kelp swaying back and forth, is those big, beautiful blades. And we call them blades instead of leaves, but they're kind of a similar shape, right? Kind of like an oval or a football shape. And they are what allows the kelp to do the photosynthesis, to take in the sunlight. And they're those really big parts that you see kind of moving through the water. Something else you might notice about our kelp, if you look at the bottom of each of the blades, they have that little dot. Did you notice that part on the kelp? What do you think that little dot might be? It's definitely something kind of different than we have on land. We don't see it in plants or trees really, because it has to do with the fact that kelp is living in water. So if we think about how we said our kelp grows, right? The holdfast is holding on to the bottom and the stipe is kind of growing up. Oh, here's a beautiful picture. We can see those little dots a little better along the blades here in the middle. So as our kelp is growing upwards and it's in the water, what did we see kind of happening in that video at the very beginning that Talia showed? What was happening as the water was moving? Yeah, the kelp is kind of swaying back and forth, right? But it's still able to grow upwards towards the sun. And it's really important it grows up towards the sun because that's where they're getting their energy from, right? They need to be able to take in sunlight to feed themselves, to make that energy. So all of our kelp on their blades had those little tiny dots. If you look closely, you can see them. Those are called nematocysts. Oh, here's a great picture where we can see one right at the bottom there. And they're basically little tiny sacs that are filled with air. So if you've ever gone to the beach and you've seen some seaweed, some kelp washed up, you might have seen these, right? And the stipe too sometimes, and you might have popped them. And you can see that they're big bulbs full of air, right? Think about it like wearing a life vest, right? If you put on a life vest, it helps you to float up to the top of the water. Well, that's exactly what the nematocyst is doing for the kelp. It allows it to grow upward and keep it floating up towards the top of the water so that even as the waves are moving back and forth, our kelp might kind of go sway like that, right? But it's still growing mostly upwards and can take in all that light to make energy. So that's a pretty cool thing that kelp has that we don't really see when we look at our plants on land. All right, so now that we've learned a little bit about the kelp itself, let's think about some of the creatures we might find living in our ocean backyard. I want you, let's see, maybe we can look at that video again, the first one that we saw. And do you see any animals living in this habitat? Take a second. You might have to do kind of an I Spy or a better search because some of them can camouflage really well. Some of them can really blend in to that kelp. Or maybe just you can already maybe think of one that you know likes to live in a kelp forest. Take a second and see if you can come up with any animals that you think might call the kelp forest their home. All right, did you think of any? Well, we definitely saw some fish that were swimming around back there. And we can actually find a really, really large species of fish in our kelp forest. You ever heard of, ooh, here's a really good video of some of our mammal friends that can live in our kelp forest. Do you know what animals these are? Yeah, these are some California sea lions, right? So you can see that beautiful brown color as they're swimming around. You can also notice if you look closely on the side of their heads, they have some little ear flaps, just like us. That's how we can tell that these are sea lions and not seals. Look how cute they are. And we can tell that that brown color was kind of helping them to camouflage into that kelp forest, right? Oh, look at this adorable picture. We got our friend Parker in the background here. We can tell because he's huge and he has that big old bump on his head. That's one of our sea lions that lives here at the aquarium in the Pacific. And they are one of the species that you can find in those kelp forests. And we can notice as they're swimming around, they've got some really cool adaptations to help them live in the kelp forest, right? An adaptation is just something that an animal has on its body to help it survive. So on our sea lions, can you notice an adaptation that you see them using? What's something on their body that is kind of helping them to survive? What are they doing in this video? Aside from being really cute, I noticed that they've got lots, well, not lots of four, but they've got kind of some flippers on the back and some flippers on the front, and those seem to be really powerful and help propel them through the water pretty fast. They seem to be some pretty good swimmers. What else? We talked about the color, right? The color can help them blend in with the kelp, or when the water's kind of more that brown, murky color, right? Some of our sea lions in the background almost seem to disappear because they're just camouflaging in so well, right? What else do you notice? How do you think our sea lions like to stay warm? Yeah, right? They look a little bit chunky. They have got some blubber on their bodies to help them stay nice and warm. We had Talia was saying she was noticing some whiskers on their face. Do you notice? Maybe this one that's coming up right now, we can see its cute little face. They've got some whiskers, right? Why do animals have whiskers? Maybe if you have a pet at home, like a dog or a cat, you know that they have whiskers too. What do you notice them using their whiskers for? Yeah, right, to help them sense stuff. So our sea lions can also use those, just like our other mammal friends, to help them kind of figure out what's going on in their habitat. So we've got to check out some of our California sea lions in our kelp forest. So I want to chat again about that fish I kind of touched on for a second that I said was really, really big. Do you know what fish this is? Ooh, Talia put up a picture behind me. And I'll tell you, it's hard to notice the scale in this picture, but these fish can be even bigger than I am. And that's pretty tall, because I will tell you, I'm almost 6 feet tall, and these fish can be bigger than me. That's a pretty big fish. This is a giant sea bass. And they are a super large species of fish that we can find in our kelp forests. We can see this one here. There's some beautiful kelp behind it. What do you notice about this fish? Other than the fact that it's pretty big, what do you see on its body? I am definitely noticing that pattern on it, right? So they have spots all over, kind of like a Dalmatian. And a fun fact about our giant sea bass is that the pattern of their spots is almost like a fingerprint. So you probably know that as humans, our thumbprint is unique to us, right? Every single person has a different fingerprint. Well, our giant sea bass are the same way. So all of their spots are a different sea bass. And by looking at their spots, we can actually tell which fish it is. Pretty cool, huh? All right. So I want to talk a little bit about this animal a little bit more because they're super important to our kelp forest. So we mentioned that these are huge fish. What do you think they might like to be eating? What do you think? They're really big, right? They seem to have a pretty big mouth, we can kind of see. Do you think they have sharp teeth in there like a shark? We can kind of see a little glimpse in their mouth. Do you see any big teeth in there? I don't see any. So I don't think our sea bass is taking a bite like a shark is. But they do have a pretty big mouth, right? And they are actually an apex predator in the kelp forest habitat, which means that they're kind of at the top, right? So they can eat basically anything else that's smaller than it in that food web, right? And they have that really big mouth to basically open it up and suck like a vacuum and grab their food that way. And they are really important in our kelp forest, right? Because they're helping to keep all those other animals in healthy populations, keep everything in check. But our giant sea bass are actually endangered. Now, why do you think this animal might have become endangered? What do you think could have happened to it? And I'll give you a hint, it has to do with humans. Oh, I heard from someone, they texted in, they said that it looks like the giant sea bass might be yummy. And you know what? If you're thinking of that at home, you're right. They actually were overfished because these are such big animals, and because they are at the top of that food chain, right? They're apex predators. They're not used to having any predators in the kelp forest. If you ever come visit us at the Aquarium of the Pacific, you can check out our giant sea bass here, and you'll notice that they move really slowly. They are like the slowest fish ever, and they seem to be really lazy. They have not a care in the world about what's going on around them because they don't feel scared. They don't need to worry about predators eating them. And they're also very curious. You'll notice when our divers get in the water, they'll kind of swim around them. They want to know what's going on. So when humans started fishing in their habitats, these giant sea bass are super curious, and they ended up getting overfished. That means too many of them were caught, and it really affected their populations and caused their populations to really, really go down. And people discovered you can get a lot of fish from them, right? Because they're really big and that they're pretty yummy. But they are now protected. And oh, here's our blue cavern. This is where our giant sea bass live. Thank you, Talia, for putting that up. They are protected, so they can't be fished anymore. And we are doing our part to make sure that giant sea bass can kind of return to those better levels out in our kelp forest. Ooh, we're also getting a glimpse at some other fish that live in a kelp forest habitat. But I want us to go back to mammals a little bit more. So remember, Talia put up that video a little bit ago of our really cute California sea lions. Now there's another really cute mammal that likes to live in kelp forests. Can you think of what it is? Do you have a guess? Whoa, look at that fish that just swam by. Oh my gosh. All right, take your guess about what the really cute mammal is that lives in the kelp forest. I'll give you a hint. It's very furry. And it also has a really cute face, maybe even cuter than a sea lion, depending on who you ask. Can you take a guess? Let's see. Talia, can we do a reveal? What is the mammal that we're talking about that is so cute? Oh my gosh. Look at that little face. You can't tell me that's not the cutest little animal ever. This is our sea otter. So, southern sea otters are another species that we can find in our kelp forests. And they use the kelp for a variety of different things. So let's chat about kind of what they can do in those kelp forests. So you might notice we're talking about the nematocyst. Talia put up a picture of the little, kind of showed the bulb, but there was another animal that was in that picture kind of hanging out on top of the kelp. It looked kind of spiky. It was kind of purple. Does anyone know what that animal is? Here's a picture of it. What is that animal there? Did you even know it was an animal? It kind of looks like a rock, right? But it's actually an animal, and it is, in fact, a purple sea urchin. Now, our sea urchins love to eat kelp. You can find them in our kelp forest, gnawing away. They have a little mouth, so we can't see it, but it's on the underside, right where it is on top of this blade of kelp. They love to eat away at that. Now, if you look at this animal, does it look like an animal that can swim like a shark or a fish, or even a sea lion? No, right? It's an animal that's hanging out on the bottom of the ocean. They can move, believe it or not. They have some little tiny tube feet. They can kind of move around slowly like that. But they're not swimming through the water the way a fish would. So they're hanging out at the bottom of the kelp forest, down where those holdfasts were, where those roots were, right? And like I said, urchins love to eat kelp. So while they're hanging out down there, they are kind of gnawing away at those holdfasts. And if there's too many urchins, it can kind of destroy our kelp forest, right? Think about if all the kelp gets eaten, there's not even a habitat left for all of our other animals to live in, right? So it's important that we kind of keep our purple sea urchin population in check. And one way we can do that is by helping out our southern sea otters. So that cute little animal that we saw is actually what we call a keystone species, meaning it's really important for the health of the kelp forest. And without it, it kind of causes negative effects for everyone else that's living there. So our southern sea otters love to eat those purple urchins. And you might be wondering, how is that even possible, right? If we look at this animal, does that look like something you would like to snack on? I definitely would not, right? It's all spiky. It doesn't look like it would make a good treat. And the parts that you probably would want to eat is on the inside. And in fact, if you've had uni, then you have eaten sea urchin, but it's on the inside, right? So how would you be able to eat an animal that looks like this? Well, if we head over to my document camera, I want to give you a closer look at my sea otter. I have a little model of a sea otter skull here. And we can chat about how they might be able to, let me zoom out here, how they might be able to eat the urchin. So here is my sea otter model. And we can look very closely here at their teeth. So, it's all out of focus. I apologize. There we go. So if we look at their teeth, we can see they kind of have some different teeth in here, right? We've got some at the back that are a little more flat. We've got some pretty sharp ones up here. And same thing on the top of the mouth, right? We have some nice sharp teeth up here that definitely could be used for getting some food, for maybe some crushing. Maybe they would be able to kind of break into the urchin with those mouth and those teeth, right? And maybe a pretty powerful bite as well. But aside from their mouth, there's another thing that our sea urchins can use to help them, our sea otters can use to help them eat those urchins. Now, if we look back at our sea urchin, we can kind of figure out, let's see, how they might be able to eat those urchins. Aside from having maybe some sharp teeth, there's something else they can do. What do we use to eat? We've got fingers and hands, right? But on our sea otter, they had cute little paws. Did you see them having any fingers that they might be able to use a fork and knife and cut it open? I don't think so, right? But they can use tools just like we do. So they're not going to use a fork and a knife, but sea otters actually love to use like a rock or something hard like that to break open that sea urchin or any other animal that might live in a shell and get to the yummy stuff that's inside. So a fun fact about sea otters that I really love is that they actually have built-in pockets. Now, where do you think a sea otter might have built-in pockets on their body? Because they're not wearing a shirt with pockets like I am, right? It's in their body somewhere. Well, they actually have kind of like a little extra pocket right in their armpit right here, and they can store stuff in there. So our sea urchins will find like their favorite rock that they love to use. Oh, thank you, Talia. We can look at their little, kind of right in here are their little pockets, right? So if our sea otter finds like a rock that they really love to use to break open their urchins, and they find like it's the best rock ever, I'm never letting this rock go, they can take it and store it in their little otter pockets and hold on to it that way. And they're really, really smart animals, right? They know to use these tools. They use their cute little paws to help them break things open, those really sharp teeth to help them kind of pull off shells or break into spines, things like that, right? To be able to get to the inside of those urchins. Oh my gosh. Look at this video that Talia just pulled up for us. Thank you, Talia. What do we see this sea otter enjoying? It looks like some shrimp. I like to eat shrimp too. And we can see, ooh, look at that. In like one smooth motion, it just pulled the whole shrimp out of there. And now we're getting a really good look at another adaptation that our sea otters have, and that is their fur. And that's why sea otters are important and why they kind of disappeared for a little bit, right? So like our giant sea bass, right, that were overfished because they're yummy, our otters were overhunted at one point in time because of that really thick fur. They have the densest fur of any animal. We can see that otter looks nice and warm for sure, right? Would keep you super cozy. So it made the population of sea otters living out in the ocean, right, pretty low. And without all those sea otters out there were a ton of sea urchins that were able to kind of take over and eat away all the kelp, right, and kind of make our kelp forest not do very well. So that's why we call sea otters a keystone species, like I mentioned earlier, because they make sure that everything is super healthy and working well together in that kelp forest. So we can see, look at those adorable little paws that it was using. So cute. I love them. And that one was eating some shrimp, but you can imagine in a similar way, right? They can use those tools, use those teeth to eat some sea urchins. All right, I think we have time to look at one other animal that lives in the kelp forest. This animal is also a fish. Ooh, do we have a question? Oh, yes, we have a few more minutes. Yeah. So, we can look at one more animal that's living in our kelp forest. This one is super bright in color, and it's another fish. Now, if you've ever been to a kelp forest, you might have spotted this one. And it's a super bright orange color. Can you take a guess? Oh, here it is. Now, it looks like a goldfish. It's not a goldfish. This is called a Garibaldi. And it's actually our California state marine fish. And if you visit a kelp forest, you'll probably see this fish hanging out there. It's really hard to miss, right? Unlike our sea lions or our giant sea bass that might kind of camouflage in with the water or the kelp. Our Garibaldi are super neon orange color and they will stand out super, super bright. So, let's take a look at our Garibaldi here. What do you notice about it? Aside from that bright orange color, what do you think? What do you see going on here? Something else that's very telltale that this is a Garibaldi. If we take a look at its tail over here, what shape do you notice? Might have to turn your head sideways, right? But it's like a cute little heart shape. So that bright orange color, that heart-shaped tail, that's telling me that this is a Garibaldi. And specifically, this is an adult Garibaldi. And I can tell that this is an adult in a couple of ways. One of them is that, of course, it's larger, right? It doesn't look like a tiny little baby. But we can also tell by that color. So this one is just bright orange all over, right? Has a little blue eye, but its scales are all nice and bright orange. Now, if we were to look at a baby Garibaldi, it would look a little bit different. I wonder if we could find a picture of a baby Garibaldi. And while we're waiting, let's make a prediction. What do you think our baby Garibaldi would look like? Do you think it would be a totally different color? Maybe it could be like purple or pink or red. Maybe it like totally changes colors as it gets older. What do you think? Or does it look exactly the same and just like tiny? That would be really cute. Oh, here it is. Did you guess that our baby Garibaldi would be neon orange with neon blue spots all over? I bet you probably didn't because it's kind of weird, right? Not that typical that the baby looks so different from the adult, but it's actually really important for the Garibaldi. So something about our Garibaldi is that they are pretty aggressive. They like to have their own space and they will defend it very aggressively. They've even been known to chase off bigger animals like sea lions to keep their little area to themselves. So when we have baby Garibaldi, they have this different coloring to tell other Garibaldis, hey, I'm just a little baby. You don't need to worry about me. I'm not a threat. And that way they know, okay, he's chill, he's cool, I can let him kind of hang out. I don't need to attack this Garibaldi and make him run off. Because remember, they want to have more Garibaldi, right? They want to be able to sustain their population. So by letting the babies kind of hang out and survive and not be bothered, the bright color protects them from these other older, very aggressive Garibaldi. And then as they get older, they will lose that color because they're big enough to get their own space to protect themselves. And they don't need to have that little warning like, hey, I'm a baby, you don't have to worry about me. So we can tell that this one's a baby. And you can see that their fins are a little smaller, not as bright orange. Kind of still that heart-shaped tail, though, just like we saw in the other Garibaldi. All right, so we are about at time for our program today. We got to learn all about the different animals we can find in our ocean backyard, the kelp forest. We learned all about the giant sea bass, some sea lions, some sea otters, and of course, the Garibaldi. I want to say thank you so much for joining me today for this episode of Aquarium Online Academy. Remember, if you want to text us or email us to let us know your thoughts, any questions you want answered, you're free to do so. That phone number is 562-286-1838 or email us at live@lbaop.org. We love to hear from you. We always want to hear those observations, those questions, things you're curious about. So once again, thank you so much for joining me. We hope to see you again soon on another episode of Aquarium Online Academy. Have a great day, everyone.